And I just have a GoPro on me, so at least I have that extra video and audio, which actually, in theory, I can send to you, and then you'll have audio from my side that you can use in case it cuts out or anything. Yeah, because it's got a micro. I mean, it's not a great microphone, but it's got a. Anyway, let's do it.
So yeah, give me like 10 seconds.
Oh yeah.
I just need to chill out, and then I'll do my little pitch thing, and then. Hello, everybody! Welcome to another Nicaragua video. It has been a while, but I'm happy because Scott is here with me, and Scott has been making videos very regularly. So I want to talk to him all about that and his time here in Nicaragua. What's up, Scott? How's it going?
Hey, things are good. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, and hello, everybody.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure most people who watch my videos already watch your videos, because there's basically like 4 people making content about Nicaragua that are foreigners speaking in English. So, yeah.
especially if the content isn't about real estate, then there's like this really tiny.
Then there's no one.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. So I figured a good place to start sort of would be when do you remember in your life when you first heard the word Nicaragua?
That I don't remember, because I've always been kind of a.
Or just when did you remember like thinking about it, or like it?
The moment that I think you're looking for was somewhere between 2003 and 2005. My wife and I were newlyweds, and we like to watch. We were always interested in travel. Always, always kind of kicked around the idea of moving abroad. Uruguay had been really high on our list for a long time, and we were watching. And this is ridiculous because it's terrible, but House Hunters International, and we used to watch it like, we're having dinner. You'd watch it, and we weren't like learning from it, right? But it would give a pretty neat view of a lot of places. Like, here's a country or a part of a country, region that you may not have thought of before, and hopefully they actually filmed it there. They don't necessarily. And it gives you at least this like draw. And both of us remember early on that we saw this episode that we don't know for sure, but we think it was filmed around San Juan del Sur, of course, 20 years ago, right? So even if it was San Juan, it's quite different. Ago. Yeah. And growing up in the US, because I'm pushing 50, right? So I have that memory of 1979 and the Contra War and all that's very recent.
Yep.
And so growing up,
nothing about.
Right. So like we knew Nicaragua was a household word, but had never thought of it as a travel or living destination. And in 2003, we just saw this episode, and both of us were like, well, that looks really interesting. It was so nice and so a surprise that both of us were like, the thing that drew us to Nicaragua, of course, the episode made it look nice, but it was that clearly we knew nothing of Nicaragua, and therefore it was this amazing potential of discovery that lay out there. And of course, we didn't move for a really long time, but it really planted a seed. And when the opportunity then came up to move to Nicaragua the first time, it was this really like, remember that episode? Well, let's go check it out. All right. So I think it was a really clear moment that both of us point to as like, no, that was the moment that it went from just a country we knew from a history lesson to this is a place we had a solid interest in, and it had become part of our consciousness.
Yeah. So let's see. You used the phrase "move to Nicaragua." So when did you first step foot in Nicaragua?
So I first stepped foot. I don't know exactly like the month, but it was in the later half of 2015. And the quick background.
So it was a while ago.
It was. So the quick
like 8 years ago.
8 years, a little bit over.
Yeah.
The quick story is we had been living briefly in Panama, and had to go back to the States because I'm an American. Had to go back to the States at the time, I still had work in the U.S., and they needed me in both New York and California for a little bit during that summer. And so we had been in Panama. We had really found it interesting. We had not gotten very much time there, but we had given up at that point. We had already moved out of the U.S., and when we were in the U.S., it was just work and live in hotels and then get back out. But we didn't keep a place in Panama. We went to the U.S., and my job decided I had to move to California. And I said, yeah, I don't need this job. And we immediately took an apartment in Nicaragua. And the logic was we had loved Panama. It had been an absolutely wonderful experience. And we said, if Panama was that great, we need to investigate Central America. We've got to know the region better, because obviously we just kind of chose Panama as a starting point in Central America. We had lived in Europe, and so we said, well, Costa Rica is kind of expensive and it's really close. It's like too close. And we both said, remember that episode, that TV show about Nicaragua. So the combination of that history with we had just been in Panama, wanted to explore more. My wife is the researcher, right? I said, let's see what you can find. And she found this beautiful house, Casa Los Arcos, in Granada. And she sent it to me while I was at the office and said, look at this beautiful house I found. And I'm like, yep, just rent it. I don't care where it is. I don't care. That's because what were we going to do? We didn't know enough about Nicaragua to make an educated guess.
You rented, though.
We rented.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So we rented, and and we have kids, right? We had 2 little kids at the time. Now they're older, but they were quite little. And so we got a place. It was 2 large bedrooms. It was basically a dual master house with pool in the middle, absolutely beautiful, in the tourist center of El Centro in Granada. And the quick story for us is Nicaragua proved to be absolutely fantastic. And Granada, while I like Granada, I like it as a tourist stop, I do not like living there. That was, and it took some time for my wife to...
Could you get more into that, actually?
Sure.
I would love to, because people ask me a lot about the different parts of Nicaragua. And my general gif is like, if you like partying, go to San Juan del Sur. If you want to see touristy stuff, go to the other places. And if you like locals, go to Managua. But obviously, that's an oversimplification. So I would love to learn more about.
So Granada, living in Granada was, so it's a beautiful city, but it's smaller, like it's about 150,000 in the metro. And it's got nearly all of the traditional tourism in the country is going to Granada. I mean, it's got the pedestrian way and the restaurants and so many hotels, and for good reason, right? It's a beautiful city. But the problem with any city of that nature, Barcelona would be a great example, is that you end up with a ratio of tourists to locals that ends up being very unhealthy. And so what often ends up happening, and both of those cities suffer from this, is an over-tourism where whole sections of the city no longer have much, if any, authenticity, and the prices start going up, and the people who are there are only there to interact with foreigners. And of course, a Cancun is like that.
A lot like San Juan del Sur.
Oh, for sure.
I lived there for 5 weeks straight, and it was like very much what you're describing. It was like bizarre.
Yeah, I've spent some time in San Juan del Sur. That is certainly more extreme than Granada, so don't think it's that bad, right? San Juan del Sur is its own animal.
Interesting, you're saying the vibe was still there.
Oh, for sure. And living in El Centro, even though we were on the edge of it, like every few hours, someone would come to our door and beg, because we were in the tourist zone. So this is just their route. And they weren't actually poor. It was just they would walk by, say they were foreigners, and instantly beg through the door. And they would scream they'd see me working. And that
happens here. So I live in Bologna, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that happens. I used to have the front of the house more open, so people could see into the sort of front part. And people could sort of see there was activity, so that would happen way more. But not every day. No, it was maybe at the most 2 or 3 times a week, and I recognize the faces, and it's the same people claiming the same sickness that their mom has from a year ago.
Right.
They say the exact same thing, and I'm just like, come on.
Yeah. When I lived in downtown Leon, I lived right in the city, in La Barrio, for those who know it. That was more like the Managua experience. It happened, but it wasn't a constant thing. In Granada, it was like you couldn't.
So Granada was a bit intense for you.
It was terrible. To the point where it took me probably 6 months nearly to convince my wife it was okay to move back to Nicaragua, that the Granada experience was not universal. That's how extreme it was. I had come back when she had not. I spent just 2 weeks here in 2019. And I came back with this renewed, I was helping a friend decide on relocating. And he did, he lives here now. But I had come down with some friends and we had hung out for a little while, and we were in the San Juan area mostly, and some in Granada. And when I went back home, I was like, you know what? It is back home. At the time we were living in Texas briefly. Home is a very relative. Right. And
you come here and you're like, oh God, I have to leave. Oh no.
Right. I got back and I'm like, both me and my best friend was with me, and she and I are both like, we want to live in Nicaragua. And I'm like, now that I've been back, like all this love of Nicaragua came flooding back. And at this point, we had lived in many more countries and had gotten stuck in the US for a little while. This is pre-COVID, but we had already gotten stuck there for work things for a year and a half. And I came back and talked to my wife, and I said, we've been searching around the world for a place to call home base. And one of the struggles we've had is trying to define what perfect is, perfect for us, of course. And that was really hard because, for example, Spain is amazing. Living in Spain was one of the best things ever. But it is so physically far, both in distance for travel and in time zones, from our families and friends in the United States that that carried a big negative. And so
call everyone at 6 a.m. and
right,
I know what you mean. Like my parents, I have family half in England or half in Europe and half in the U.S. and I can only talk to the Europeans if I like make sure I call them right first thing in the morning, because for them it's like 12-hour time difference or something. Or 14 hours. Like it's absurd.
Yeah, so that stuff really drove us away from Europe, even though we did love living there, and we potentially could easily live in Europe. Like we have a situation that it's an option for us, and we really seriously investigated a number of places and absolutely loved it. But Nicaragua was so much of all the things we needed, right? Close to family physically. If we need to get back to family in the U.S., hours. If we need to talk to them on the phone, same time zone. Like all these great things. And low cost of living, like even lower than most of the places we've been in Europe. Not necessarily lower than all, but really low. And again, really good opportunity for the country would let us stay. It wasn't like this big complicated thing. And so I went back and talked to her and I was like, look, we're trying to find the perfect place. We could spend our entire lives trying to find the perfect place. We know that Nicaragua checks all of our necessary boxes. We know that we love it. We know that it's affordable. We know that we can do it. We know that it's safe, and we know that it like is a place we would be happy. And we know it would make us happier than other options we've considered. And so it took a little bit. And the big deciding factor was one day, my business partner and I were looking at houses or structures in San Juan del Sur at the time, foolishly. And we found one on the beach, and I showed it to my wife. I'm like, see, like, imagine our life in a place like this. This would be so much better than North Dallas. And she goes, oh, that's on the beach. I'm like, yeah. She's like, we could have a house on the beach? And I'm like, yes. And she goes, well, I would move if we got a house on the beach. I said, now wait. This is like our epic conversation. I said, if you say, right.
Do you really mean this?
I'm like, if you say,
no turning back.
Right. I'm like, I will sell this house today and I will fly down there and buy a house on the beach. And she goes, I mean it. If I can live on the beach, we will move to Nicaragua. I'm like, done. And so unfortunately, COVID hit like right as we were in the midst of trying to get our first place.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting delayed because of that. But that was literally, she said it and we're like, done. Everything from that conversation over breakfast was now the house is for sale.
Yeah, that's how, once you get the family on board, everything else.
Well, and my kids were like, we love living abroad. We don't want to be in the States. Nicaragua, they only kind of remembered because they were so little, but they were like, our memories of it are good. Yeah, I think we want to go back there. And, but it's funny, my kids, so this is 3 years ago now, were like, so we'd love to grow up in Nicaragua, but we know when we're adults, we're going to move back to Texas because that's close to family and cousins and it's what we know. And like my eldest daughter had already picked out where she wants an apartment someday in North Dallas.
Nicaragua and Texas are closer than the East and the West Coast.
Oh, by far.
Like, yeah, it's super close.
But it only took...
It's not even that expensive, you know?
It's
plane tickets are like $300-$400.
Oh, yeah. No, it's not bad. Actually, from here, we can get to Texas for $120. Yeah, you have to really hunt around, but those flights are there.
That's crazy.
It is. But now it was only about a year here, and both of my kids are like, no, we're planning on living here or nearby. My eldest is kind of, she's toying with Guatemala in the future, but just as like an idea, but they don't want to go any farther than that. They want to be in the general region. They really love it here. They're like, nope, this is home. This is what they consider home.
Yeah, that's such a cool story too, because it really goes to show how like, you can't think that one experience is everything, you know, and a lot of people do that. And especially with women or dating about Nicaragua. I'm sure you've come into this with, you make videos and people comment, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll be like, all right, what are women like that? Like, okay, all 4 million women, tell me about that.
Right. They're like this.
Like, oh yeah, because this one experience someone had, that means they're all this way, you know?
Yes. I'm amazed.
That mistake, so.
There's so many of the comments that I get are, I once heard somebody claim this thing happened. And it's a reasonable thing. Like, it could happen, right? Like, he was robbed on a street corner. I'm like, okay, I guarantee someone has been robbed on a street corner in Nicaragua. There's no way they weren't. Okay, so, but you do realize that in the United States, that happens every minute, right? And we don't freak out about it because it's just a part. I mean, it sucks.
No, the U.S. doesn't have any problem. We're the land of the free. Everyone wants to be us, man. Obviously.
Poor us trapped down here. Yeah, it's
so tragic.
It's so weird here, though, that the stories of it happened once. I'm like, yes, it happened. All kinds of things happened once. This is why we use percentages when talking. If you're not talking to me about a percentage, then I know this doesn't matter, right? Anecdotal evidence of things.
Called hearsay.
Right. I mean, even if you know it happened, it's still anecdotal. Like I've had bad things happen to me here, right? But obviously none of them are tragic. I'm here and I'm fine and I'm happy. But like, some negative things have happened. Will they happen to you? Probably not. It was probably a very freak thing that happened to me, but something will happen to you. But you know what? If I was living in the U.S., something would happen to me too. I was in the U.S. and
I got mugged in the U.S. and
I had the police involved in stealing my car in the U.S. Right? I got on the news, all kinds of things. Like, it was crazy. But
that brings up so you just mentioned police and you've been in the U.S. So I'm curious, what's it like for you, having been in the U.S. and been around how police are in the U.S. and police in Nicaragua? How could you compare their vibe?
Is that my episode for today? Have you? Is it? I don't know. I can't remember what day I think my actual episode that went up a couple hours ago is comparing the police, U.S. and Nicaragua.
That's funny.
So
I must have seen a thumbnail or something.
Right. So yes, if you see it, there's one where they're all eating donuts. Like, it's computer.
Oh, you're right. No, the AI thumbnail. That is it. That's
okay.
Why I asked the question. I didn't watch the video, but I
okay.
Did see that.
So it's just a few.
Like, that is a cool AI thumbnail. Donuts. Yeah.
So the biggest thing, I think, is for me, like, the thing that, having analyzed it, and dealing with police in both places and knowing police in both places, like, I know, like, in my everyday life, I talk to American and Nicaraguan police officers, right? And not because I'm always committing crimes, like, I know them personally. And I mean, also because I'm committing crimes, but that's separate.
It's also like small town here, you know. It's really easy to actually speak with police officers and like get to know them. You recognize their faces and stuff, you know.
Oh, for sure. I get pulled over on the highway, and I mean, because you do. Because for those who don't know, you get pulled over here at random. You don't get pulled over because you're speeding. I mean, you probably would, but it's regular stops, and everybody gets stopped. And because of where I live, I'm on a road that doesn't get a ton of traffic of locals, and we do have a lot of police stops. I live near the beach, so it's a beach stop, and I get pulled over quite often. So the last time I got pulled over, I rolled down the window, and the guy's just like, how you doing? Like, they know instantly. They're like, obviously you have your papers. We checked you yesterday, right? They're like,
dude, everything goes so much better if they've seen your face and you've smiled.
Oh,
I
yes.
noticed that living in the perimeter, they were like, at first they're like, and then I'm like fist bumping them a month later, and they're like, "What's up, man?" Like,
yeah, it's a very different thing. So having put in a lot of thought about this and making an episode about it yesterday, the thing that I find that I think is the most different, the really underlying thing, is that in the United States you have decentralized police, meaning you have village police, and they're within a town, and they're within a county, and they're within a state, and then they're within the federal. And
and they can't sort of cross that line, you know.
And sometimes they can, and sometimes they can't. But each of them have different things that they're responsible for. You interact with them in different ways. They have different jurisdictions. The laws vary as you move. Like, if I go for a long walk in the U.S., say I walk for 3-4 hours, I could cross three or four.
Three different.
Yeah.
rules.
And so like where I grew up in a dry town in the US, but I could walk to a wet one. And it's like in this place where I'm walking, it's illegal to have alcohol. And in this one there are bars, and it's just down the street. And like the police here have to make sure there's no alcohol, and the police over there can go have a drink with you. Like it's totally different worlds. And it's
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
everything, every little law. In this one, it's illegal to own a donkey. In this one, it's illegal to put a donkey in a bathtub. In this one, you're allowed to put donkeys on airplanes. Like they have just every, and nobody knows the
So
laws.
just to be clear, you're referring to the U.S. and
Yes. So the U.S. has this
state to state or county to county. The rules can change a lot.
right a lot, and there's no way to know what they are. You both have little to no access to know what the law is, and you have little to no access to know what town or county you're actually in at any given time. So you, even if you knew the law, you don't necessarily know what the
Not like you're
application
gonna
of it
memorize
is.
all the laws.
Right. It's absolutely crazy. And if you're a person who never leaves home, you have some hope of knowing what you're allowed to do. But if you're a normal American and have to commute to work, travel for anything, exercise any of your supposed freedoms, you are in a literally impossible scenario where no human could know what you're actually allowed to do and not do, or where you are. Like it's too complex. Here in Nicaragua, of course, they have the benefit of being a really tiny place. So it's much more like a single large city jurisdiction. That's an underlying factor to things.
Yeah.
But the approach to law enforcement
Nicaragua
here,
is basically one state.
it
Small
basically is. Yeah, it's physically the size of New York with a population more similar to an Alabama and or an Arkansas. And the here it's a national, it's a federal police force. And so one of the things that's interesting is that in Managua you have a head of the police force, and that person's in charge of regional heads. And those regional heads then have satellite offices. So, for example, Malpaisillo is a small jurisdiction here in Leon. They have their own police force, but they report to Leon proper. If something was to go wrong, they would just get resources. They could shuffle
Yeah.
people around. And if Leon, something was to go wrong, or they're just short people, they just call Managua, and Managua shuffles people around. And it's one complete thing. And the laws, the training, the instructions, the behavior is the same no matter what city, departamento, whatever, no matter where you are. If something's
Yeah,
different,
just the name of this city is different, but everything else is the same.
right. And like you'll have a local police office to go to, station, that's what they're called. And so, but it'll operate exactly the same as the other station down the street or across the country. You don't have to worry about, I'm in Leon, so am I allowed to drink outside at night? Am I allowed to go to a bar? Am I allowed to walk across the street against a stoplight? Like all those things, of course, you can do here anywhere. But in the US, every town, you'd be like, ooh, each of these things is unique by town. And they're not posted. There's no central information of what those things are. And here, like traffic laws are uniform. But where I grew up in New York, they had one traffic circle that by convention, the local police, who were very corrupt, took bribes or something, pressure from the local businesses, and they didn't use federal law for the highway, and they enforced a fake made up local law for the traffic circle, and it caused an unbelievable number of accidents, and they would ticket the people who were following the official law. And
Yeah.
that would never happen here.
That's
right?
crazy.
Yeah, it's very strange. So from that aspect, I find that here the system is much more straightforward and much more predictable. And most of the things that you like and or dislike are caused by this underlying mechanism. The other big thing that I find is that in the U.S. they're very active in this concept of like patrolling. Like they're patrolling the roads. They're going to chase you. They're like out and about, moving around, trying to find you. And here,
Yeah, trying to find tickets.
yeah, and here,
Just got tickets on the road.
right, yeah, that's such a huge piece of, and it's so dangerous, right? Making people constantly watch for police, worry about cops instead of worrying about hitting kids. Like it causes so many accidents. And here, they do these random traffic stops. Random, they're pretty predictable. And pretty much, if you're going to be driving a lot, like I'm going to drive to Managua today. For me, that's a couple hours. So if I'm driving to Managua, chances are I'm going to have between 1 and 3 of these stops. And it's super easy. I need to have my driver's license. I've got to have my insurance. I have to have my registration. and like one other thing. And you just have a little stack of these things, and they're cards. They're really easy, right? So you just keep them in your dash, and you get pulled over, you roll down your window, you have them ready, and you just smile and hand them to the officer. You're just like, here you go, this is what we're doing, right? And they'll either just look at them and be like,
Yeah, it's
have a good
part of
day.
it.
Right. And they'll inspect your headlights. They'll walk around your car maybe. Once in a while, they'll pop your trunk and be like, let's just see what you got back here, right? Especially near the beaches, because things can be smuggled in from the beaches. And it's like really straightforward. And like this stop is going to take me between 15 seconds and 2 minutes. And they don't suspect me of anything. I didn't do anything wrong. They're friendly. And it's just this really easy interaction. Of course, if you panic and you don't know what you're doing, it seems scary. Why am I being pulled over?
Yeah.
But you get used to it. And it's just like, oh, I don't mind at all interacting with the police. And the other thing, and I want to point this out because I think it's really significant. I didn't say this on my show, is in the U.S., the engagement with a traffic stop is generally one-on-one. You have a driver and a cop, and the cop approaches the car after having pulled them over. There's a given suspicion, because legally in the U.S. you have to have suspicion, so you always have an aggravated interaction.
Yes, that's something you claim.
Right. So there's always some adversarial situation going on. Here in Nicaragua, being pulled over is not adversarial. It's process. So that first thing, in the U.S., you have a cop with a weapon, and they're required to be hand on the weapon. It's incredibly threatening. They come up, and you know that a weaponized person ready to attack you is going to, by law, accuse you of a crime, or at least accuse you of suspicion of a crime. Maybe a minor one, maybe going a few miles up, but something. And so it's a very tense interaction, and both parties are very scared of the other party. Every person, and no one can convince me otherwise, there's no such thing as a person being pulled over by an American cop who isn't afraid of that cop. The chances that you're going to be shot are relatively low, but there's always fear. It is a fearful interaction. And cops are universally terrified of the people they pull over because the number of people who are weaponized in the car and react because they're panicking is very high. And so you get this interaction where the chances of something going wrong are really high. It's designed to create bad results. It is engineered. If you had to say, how would you design an unhealthy interaction? That's what you would do. Here, if for some reason you're being pulled over, random stop or something happened, whatever, the cop, the Celeste, that approaches your car, so they're in blue, and you know that they've got a club, they've got a flashlight, but they do not have a serious weapon. They do not have a knife, they do not have a gun. So you know you're going to have a conversation. You also don't know that it's going to be adversarial. They might just be stopping you because the headlight's out. Dude, your headlight's out. Can you get that fixed? Oh, man, I didn't notice. Thanks. Right? I've had that happen. So you have this very casual. They know that you don't perceive them as a threat because everyone knows no one has a weapon. But there is a negra, one of the cops in black, standing very far away with a high-powered rifle. That guy is not afraid of you because he's far away with a big weapon. He's not engaging you. He's not in your face. He's not threatening you. There's no scary interaction. He's completely calm. Turn down my phone here. And that means he can think logically. Is there real danger? Does something have to happen? In order for a really bad interaction to happen with the cops, the person in the vehicle has to freak out at an unarmed person, decide to attack them, and only then find out that a person very far away with a high-powered rifle has plenty of time to take aim, take a shot, and end the situation. So it creates a situation where no one's scared.
Oh, I'll take one note I want to point out about that is that Nicaraguan police, as far as I can tell, are really hesitant to shoot people. So just what you just said, where they might, from what I can tell, in most cases, a cop wouldn't shoot someone even if they were robbing. They would try and accost them, but it's like they're taught to not do that. Like to shoot somebody is something that is taken very seriously, like incredibly seriously. So I just say that just because in the U.S., if someone has an assault rifle.
Oh no, you froze on me here.
Can you hear me?
There we go. You came back. I heard if someone has an assault rifle.
So in the U.S., if a police officer has an assault rifle and they're holding it, they're trained, like not just with assault rifle, sorry. The way the police are trained in the U.S. with a weapon is if they're pointing it at you to shoot, they're shooting you to kill you. There is no like shoot them in the feet. None of that. It's literally shoot them to kill them 3 times in the chest, whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how we teach. And I just want to outline that because the biggest difference between the police in Nicaragua and the police in the U.S. is the police in the U.S. have a system that enables them to kill. And if they do, yeah, they might lose their job or whatever, but whatever. If you're
and even that's unlikely.
You be very scared of them, like realistically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, it's like they're so taught that like killing someone is horrific. They don't want to. They'd be terrified to live with that because they were raised by people who have to deal with that shit. Mm-hmm. So like they're very. It's different, you know.
It is. It really is.
Thing was so tragic because you know that like that's the culture of the police. There's no way that they are just blindly opening fire on protesters. Like that so is not the way the police here behave.
Right.
But yet that's what is claimed, and you know it's horrific. But
it's easy. It's easy to claim that to Americans.
Because here, it's not that simple. Like they wouldn't just shoot someone.
Right, and it's easy to claim that in America and have people believe it because if that happened in America, of course that's what would happen. Right. That is, it's to an American. That's just obviously it's going to be protesters and cops shooting at each other because both sides are armed, both sides are violent. That's just how it works, and the idea that other countries are much safer, like in England, the same thing. You would never have that happen in England. The cops aren't weaponized like that. They're trained not to do that. And the idea that you're suddenly going to have riots in London and everyone shooting at each other, the chances of that are so incredibly low. But in the U.S., it would just be like, how could it not? It's amazing it doesn't happen every day.
Yeah. Well, there's something I wanted to share. Did you hear about the prisoner swap or the release they did here?
To the U.S.?
Yeah.
Yeah, I use it as an example often that the United States list as the worst possible punishment, inhumane treatment, is being sent to the United States. They never say that the punishment was sent to the United States, but they say how terrible the treatment is. They're letting people. So first of all, it was an option. They had committed a crime. Most of them had admitted to it. They were serving their sentences, and they were given an option. So an option can never be inhumane, right? If the option is we're going to shoot you to the moon and you're going to die on impact, well, you can just say no because it's an option, right? Like it would be awful, but if that's what you want to do, that's fine. These people were given an option to be sent to the United States, and most of them chose it. But the United States listed, even being given the option of going to the U.S., is so inhumane that it's like this terrible, terrible crime that nobody should be punished by even being permitted to go to the United States. It was such a weird reaction from the U.S. government.
Yeah. Well, something that's very telling about that. Have you ever heard of the U.S. accepting political prisoners from another country? Out of curiosity.
It's been a while, but I feel like, quite often they do.
I don't know too much about
They do.
it, really.
Actually, yeah.
I need to learn more about it.
Famously, political prisoners from Brazil, Peru, most places where U.S. have backed dictators and been involved in genocides, normally the U.S. will accept people who are being persecuted for committing war crimes or similar in the name of the U.S. or at the behest of the U.S. It's an important part of.
That was my gut, or when I saw that, because a friend of mine, a Nicaraguan local, who's kind of like not like super super privileged, but definitely comes from a privileged family who's like well connected and that kind of thing. He was telling me how basically it's like it's sort of like, okay, before the 2018 stuff, I used to sort of think that, the U.S. government has nothing to do with that. And I'm not saying that they did that or like they orchestrated the whole thing. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that it's quite interesting that basically all these people who were involved with the 2018 thing and all of the money we were putting into social media and accessing these people, we then accepted them into our country after they were arrested in Nicaragua, which just it's just very suspicious. It's like, why do we want them?
Right. Why is the U.S.
Do we
just
pay
blanket
them?
taking everyone?
Are they our people?
Right.
Like,
That was the claim from Nicaragua, that's why they were sent to the U.S. because they were. So in many cases, the thing that they were charged with was acting as foreign agents of the United States, which is
yeah, it's so messy, man.
yeah.
I looked more into where the money goes that the U.S. funds, and it's social media stuff. So a lot of there's basically push a narrative, and so that's why I'm saying I don't think that the U.S. did it. But basically, what they do is they find young Nicaraguans who are angry, and they teach them a narrative. And the narrative is, you need to fight. If you're a true patriot, rise up. You need to overwhelm. To establish your... They teach this violent rhetoric, and it's like, how can we claim that we are free and democratic when we literally instill terrorism to this day? Like, it's just... I don't get it, man. I don't get it.
Well, that's the claim of democracy, right? You only have to talk about democracy when you don't have it. People who have it don't need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? So like, and it's funny because, a lot of people point to the founding fathers in the U.S. for the American audience, right? Like, oh, the founding fathers would blah, blah, blah. Well, the founding fathers were pretty clear that they didn't believe in democracy, right? We know that from their writings. We know they said it straight up. Democracy's bad. Right, it's mob rule. That's how you get the worst possible outcome.
Representative democracy.
Right. Well, it wasn't even a representative democracy. It was just a representative republic. Right. They never used the word democracy because at the founding time of the United States, the word democracy was tantamount to anarchy, and so they would never use it because the concept was considered very foolish. No sensible people would ever desire a democracy. But then, over a period of time. Well, so over time, what they did in the U.S. was they said it's very hard to control people. It's very hard to control the narrative when you can't blame the people for things. So they started taking what was in no way a democracy and calling it a democracy because it shifts the blame onto the people.
Yeah, it's like, well, everything's happening is because you voted for the people.
Right.
This is you. What do you mean?
Right. And so they claim two things. One is that your vote is sacred, and you can vote for, if you could vote for genocide, they'd be like, no, it's a vote, so it's okay to vote for genocide. Genocide's wrong, but voting for it, desiring it is good. No, wait, what? But that's how they treat it, is that the vote is a special case where your ethics, your morals, your legal responsibilities are lifted. And so you don't have to follow, right, any ethical guideline. It's special. It's even above God, right? If whatever religion you are, voting is above that, right? So they take the U.S. Political system and make it a religious figure, and they play on religious groups to be like, oh, this feels like a religion, but it's higher than your religion, so it overrides your required ethics, and then that the religion gives you, which is already overriding ethics of just humanity, and so you have this. You can do anything as long as you're voting for it. And then once it's been voted for, well, it's too bad. The government's just doing what it's told to do. It doesn't have a choice.
Yeah, they're like separate systems, like security theater. There's the voting thing that flashes and get your attention and makes you feel like you have a say. But that's actually totally separate from what the government's actually doing.
Right.
And that's the disturbing part. It's like you realize that this is all, like the president who gets elected isn't elected because most people vote for them.
Right.
It's a separate system, and really for them to even be on the ballot in the first place, they have to be fucking rich, like really fucking rich, like next level rich, not even like, oh, you're a rich business person. Like, you're a rich business person who knows thousands of rich business people. That's how you become president. That's what we created, that system. So, yeah, I totally agree.
Which is the nature of democracy, right? The closer you get to democracy, the more awful it's going to get, because it is mob rule. It's whoever can control the media, whoever can get the message out. Like, you're always going to vote for famous people.
The game RuneScape.
Yes, I've not played it.
Okay, so basically, there's RuneScape, and then they fucked it up, and then realized they'd fucked it up, and made an old version of it. So there's two RuneScapes.
Yes, yeah, because it was Sony, right?
RuneScape, and then regular RuneScape. And so what's really interesting about old school RuneScape is it features a democratic polling system for updates. So for anything to pass, 70 or 75%, I don't remember what it is, of all players have to pass. But what's really interesting is listening to the developers talk about how much of a pain in the ass it has been running the game that way for 4 or 5 years. Because basically what they're saying is that most regular players just don't vote.
Right.
Like the people you're trying to represent don't get involved. So what you end up happening is all of these special interest groups that don't represent like the most player base, they end up having all the control of which polls pass. And I think that's so cool because it's a perfect illustration of what happens when you create a system that's abusable. You can't just be like, oh no, yeah, people could abuse that system, but only somebody evil would do that. Right. It's like, no, people are just going to abuse it, you know? You make a system.
Right, and it doesn't.
Abusable.
And in many cases, things like this, right, people always say, well, it takes this huge conspiracy. It does not. This is a system that is naturally abusable. If you take enough people and give them, well, we're going to reward you.
Flowing down the path of least resistance.
Right. Yeah, like, okay, so you're just going to do the thing that's easiest, and that thing is not good for everybody, but it's going to make you money. So you're going to do it. Why would I not do it? You made a system that rewards me for this, so clearly you want it. Right? Because I'm a business consultant. I deal with this all the time, that it's like you created like companies, CEOs will create a reward system where they reward people for stealing from the company or lying to them or like doing huge amounts of damage. And it's like, no wonder you're losing so much money because you've created a system where it's the profits.
Yeah, it's profitable to mess with you.
Right.
That was the problem on YouTube in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. So often it's the greatest profits come from stealing from the investors rather than making a good product. But it's because the investors reward that. They actually make choices that force that to happen, and then the employees just do what they're told to do by the investors, which is steal from the investors in many cases.
Yep.
It's a very depressing thing working in business consulting, let me tell you.
So to make a pivot,
yes.
I want to talk about YouTube now.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool, man, seeing how you're really passionate and like you've made so much content over the years, but I can tell how now, like, you want to be sharing stuff and putting yourself out there. And I want to ask, like, what are you trying to do? Like, why are you making videos here? What's your...
So that's an interesting question. So I think I have to look at this historically. So 1999, which is a big year for me. I started my own firm in early 99. And my roommate and I were like, we hated working for people, but we loved working. And the thing that made us that made us so upset was that we would get jobs and they wouldn't let us do a good job. They forced us to do bad work. And it was really frustrating.
Yeah, so looking like you're doing a good job.
Yes, it was awful.
Not doing a good job. That's
right.
Different.
Yeah. So we said, you know what? Let's just start our own firm and answer to no one and start doing stuff. And so we did. And it took about a year to get going, but we did. And so 99 was a big year. Later in the year, as part of starting the company, I ended up, I don't know if you've ever started a company, but you tend to be pretty poor for a really long time. So we were living on couches of friends and stuff. And so we had friends in Ithaca, New York, and we were crashing on their couches. And while I was living this like really wild on the road, constant consulting lifestyle, trying to bootstrap a company, I kind of didn't have really great communications with my family just because I was busy, right? I mean, we had good communications, but like I couldn't like call them and talk to them every day. I was living far away from home. And so I started writing a blog before the word existed, before there were WordPress and platforms like that. I started just hand coding HTML and putting it up on a website because we owned a hosting company. We owned all this stuff because of the business. So I was like, oh, I have these resources. I'll just make a blog. But in the early days, I would just delete it after a week and put up another one. Very foolish. And after about a year...
It's not foolish at all, man. People have too much attachment to their content. Really.
But
you need to be able to just create, wipe slate screen, create.
I actually really appreciate my old stuff.
That you didn't use was ever wasted. It all developed your skills and served some purpose. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made it.
True. But in about 2000, so I really started this kind of process as a way to communicate to family and friends. Like I was sharing my life so that I didn't have to worry that people weren't up to date on what was going on because my life was kind of an adventure.
You could just send them the link to the blog instead of typing it all. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I got more and more into it, and my blog is enormous, right? Like there's so much content, and at some point, I've always been like I was a professional photographer when I was younger. Like making videos and doing YouTube kind of stuff has always been interesting, and I got into podcasting back in the 2003 2004 range, and did that for a little while. And so I'd done some of these things. So I was really busy with my company for a long time, so that took a lot of my attention. But I always did this blog in the background. And then about 4 years ago, almost exactly, I said, you know what? I'm so tired of writing long form every day what was going on. At that point, I could take my cell phone and set it on my desk because I was always working and just record what was going on for the day as if I was calling my dad, but it was always after he would have gone to bed. And so I would just record for him and then just upload to YouTube and no edit, no intent of anybody seeing it. And just be like, hey, Dad, follow this, and every day you can see what's going on. And so it made my life easier that instead of spending 30 minutes writing, I could spend 4 minutes recording. And that kind of got me into a groove. I'd always liked filming. This was after I had filmed my show, Take Flight with Scott, where I'd taken my nieces to Europe for a few months and filmed them traveling. But I never got into like editing or anything like that. I was just recording some content. And then it really was through COVID. Like, obviously, I did it a lot because what else are you going to do?
Yeah, stuck at home all day.
Yeah, I'm at home, but I didn't have any cameras. I didn't have like anything to do it with. It was like I just had my, I don't know, my OnePlus 9 or whatever. And when we moved to Nicaragua, and I'd kind of played with this idea a little bit before then, but because of COVID didn't happen. When we moved, I was like, oh, I should record more. I should make sure I have a good GoPro and like get more stuff. And we moved and I did a little bit, and then we got so busy that I lost like 6 months that I basically never recorded. And then one day we decided we were going to move into Leon. Long story, like living at the beach can be stressful. And so we got a place in Leon, and I made a video where I don't know, I just had a little bit more free time. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a little bit more work. And I did like a funny edit, and I did a little bit. It was just a little bit more polished than things I'd done before. And all of a sudden, instead of 5 views, and at this time I had like 80 to 100 followers, and mostly family and friends, right, from way back. They're like, I would post a clip of my dog, a clip of my kids playing.
So that's
like
when you broke through and you realized that when you post content that's useful to people,
right,
it grows.
Yeah, it was like a completely different thing. And I hadn't thought of making a channel in that way. I had never intended to make a vlog that people were going to watch. But this one episode, I like just had some fun with it. And I got like, I don't know, probably like 100 views. It was not anything crazy. But it was like, oh.
Everything's relative, man.
Right. It was like.
Someone, like there's people who make YouTube videos would love a video of theirs to get 100 views.
Right. People. Well, and I did. I was super excited. And I'm like, okay, things just changed. And so I said, okay, I need to think about this. What did I do? Is this something that could make sense? What did I do that people were interested in? And so I played around with it. That was January. And from January to March, this is 2022, so about 2 years ago, I was like, okay, trying to figure this out. And so this moving to Leon thing got like 100 views. I was like, whoa. And I had over 100 followers, and I was just starting to get followers I didn't know, right? Like this isn't like far-flung friends. Now it's random people. Yeah. And then in March, I made an episode. I went to Chinandega and Corinto and filmed like the parks and like a whole bunch of buildings. And like, it was much more like my episodes now. And I hit 300 subscribers and like 300 views. And it was like completely different numbers. And I'm like, okay, people actually want to see this. Now I see what's going on. And
YouTube thrills.
Yeah, it was like, all right. And I edited it. Like I had done a bunch of things that I hadn't done before, and I'd taken people with me, and it was like, okay, I don't know the formula, but I can see clearly that I'm making something people are interested in. And really, that was that was it, right? It was like, it was like I really enjoy owning cameras, and I like doing the editing. Like I like all the pieces.
Yeah.
And I kind of accidentally became a vlogger that people were watching a little bit, and that was it. And I was kind of hit by.
That makes a lot of sense, because I can tell the way you create is not like someone who's just making a YouTube channel. Like you very much I relate to that at least. I can tell that you have a habit of creating an expression. And you're sort of, that energy, that habit has existed for many years, right? And it was just going to other platforms, or you were writing, but then it evolved into video and recording and audio, and then YouTube, and then sharing. And then it's like, for me, it's like, how do I sort of experience something in a way where I can take that experience, compartmentalize it, sort of cut it up a little bit, and then package it, and then people learn from it. And that's how I try to live my life. It's just like, make anything you do is a potential video.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm very much like that. So you probably know I have something like 20 channels. And so I have some that are older. And they're like, I made a channel for traveling with friends so that I could film traveling with friends and put it somewhere. And I have a channel that was always me doing business education, business and technology education. And that one, it took me 4 years on the vlog to catch up to that one. And now, like, I crossed when both were between 2,000 and 2,002 subscribers. Like, that's how close it was. And now I'm at like 2,100 and 5,200, right? So the one is way outpacing the other, but the other was thousands ahead for, I don't know, 5 years. But it wasn't a vlog, right? Very different thing. I don't even associate them as the same part of my life. But now I have a channel that's just viewing Nicaragua in 360 degrees. I have a channel that's just traveling from the dashboard of my car, like high speed, because I enjoy making that. People
like seeing that as well, because they need to see that, like, in their heads, everything's on fire. It's burning. There's explosions, helicopters flying through the air, dropping bombs. Like, that's how they think about Nicaragua. So when they see, like, chickens and birds, and stuff, and children playing in the street, they're like, what?
Right. And beautiful horizons and gorgeous fields and sunsets and the mountains in the distance. And you're like, this is gorgeous. Where are you? You're like, this is just driving around Nicaragua. Yeah. And I do the same thing in the US. I have one, I haven't posted it yet. I actually drove from Texas to New York to Florida in a single go and have it all on video. It's interesting.
So let's see, another YouTube question for you. I've noticed that your videos recently have been more sort of, it seems like you're trying to, you're making something that's informative, whereas before you were experiencing something and just recording it. So I'm curious, like, what kind of things do you think have you personally been sort of trying to do differently with your videos, especially recently, maybe over the past maybe 4 or 5 months?
So I think a big thing that's changed for me is just what my free time has looked like. Because while I'm a full-time YouTuber in a way, probably more than most people, the reality is I run multiple companies full-time, and I'm extremely busy, and those workloads can scale up and down quite a bit. From other countries.
Sort of fills in the gaps, so to speak.
Right. So at times I'll be like, I've got free time. And like earlier this year, so before the period you're talking about, I had a number of months where I had access to our car unfettered. I was the only driver around because the other driver spent a huge portion of the year living in Southeast Asia. And so I had the car and was constantly running errands. And so I would be in different physical places and be like, I got my GoPro, I'm going to run out and record while I'm out. Record for an hour and just head back home. And so I got a lot of footage where I was out and about. And I had someone living with me for a little while that she was a backpacker and living here, and she'd be like, let's go, let's record some stuff. So we were doing things together, and I had that kind of energy going on. Now, for the last several months, I've had an awful lot of really good stuff with work. Like, there's a lot of growth, a lot of things going on. My key right-hand person at work has been living in Europe for a few months on an extended vacation, so I'm covering for her. And so there's a lot of stuff where I'm really tied to my desk. And so because of that, obviously to me, the content I enjoy making the most is when I'm able to get out and explore new places and walk around. It's also the hardest for me to find time to do because I'm doing so much stuff otherwise, and I'm really tied to my office a bit, which I'm trying to fix, but it's very hard. And so now I'm putting in a lot of effort into, I've discovered that if I really proposition people for questions, like, tell me what you want me to talk about. There's a lot of information that I have that I don't think about being important necessarily.
Yeah, you just don't realize it's relevant to people.
Yeah, and then people.
That's why you have to listen to people's feedback. Otherwise, you don't know all the things that are like, what?
Right.
Why don't you think you can do this?
Right. Someone will be like, "Can you tell me what it costs to move into an apartment?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Right. So I made an episode of breaking down an actual purchasing of chairs and like the most boring stuff. But here's a real world budget. Here's the actual dollars spent on moving into a studio apartment in the last month in Leon. Here you go. And so a couple things, because I love doing a bunch of these things. I love looking at houses, right? I'm not a real estate agent, but I like looking at houses. So when someone says, "Hey, you can come see a house," I'm like, "I'm there. Run over, just film the house." And people really like that.
That's awesome, man, because I just don't get out enough, but I can tell how, as a YouTuber here with access to foreigners, there's so much opportunity to just make charismatic videos showing off people's real estate to foreigners who can call them and buy it. Like, and they're happy to. They're like, yeah, come record it, because it's a free ad.
You know what's funny is the
might result in the sale of their in-house.
Yeah, so if you get expats, they're like, yes. If you get locals, the chances that they want you to promote their house is definitely under 50%. They'll be like, "No, you're going to sell the house." I don't know, and you're like, "But you advertised it." They're like, "Yeah, but we want it limited." You're like, what?
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it's really weird. The number of people who are like, and even real estate agents, like I'll work with an agent and they'll show me the house. And we're like, we just send, if anybody calls us, we just give them your number. And they're like, "Nope, we don't want anyone promoting a house we're selling." And it's like, do the people who pay you to sell the house know that you're intentionally stopping people from finding out about the house? And I can't figure out what the motivation is. We have some theories of like they think someone's going to steal it or they're going to get cut out or something. But
yeah, there's so much. There's a lot of like. Okay, Nicaragua is amazing, but it's not like everyone is totally open-minded. There absolutely is prejudice in these things, and people treat foreigners very well, but they also think foreigners are kind of stupid. So like
many are.
It's like,
it's true.
Yeah, and I don't blame them. I mean, I don't blame them for saying that at all. But there is like a mistrust sometimes, and I know about that just because when I've tried to get on a lease, right, I'm a foreigner, and I've had most of the time I'm treated like, hell yeah, here you go, pay, cool, awesome, and they don't give a fuck. They're like, yeah, just pay the rent. That's awesome. We don't have any tenants. Awesome. But one time, there was a lady who did not want me to be on the lease because I was a foreigner, and she felt like I could just fuck off and there's nothing she could do about it.
Right. And to some degree, that's true.
I didn't get put on that lease. And then the locals who did get put on the lease fucked off. And there was nothing she could do about it. And I was just like, well, did you learn your lesson, huh? Because I see her in the grocery store because I live like next door. And so I just think it's really funny that like at some point in this lady's life, she was like, "No, this foreigner's unreliable. I don't know how long he's going to be around." And she chose to not put him on the lease.
Right.
And then for like 5 years after that, she sees that same foreigner in the same grocery store every couple of months. Really
yeah, I do know
of. It's probably something to do with that.
I do know people
too. They can have some prejudice.
Yeah,
like foreigners purchasing things.
That certainly can be a factor. A lot of people are like, I think, or like, we want to keep this in Nicaragua. Like, I want to sell it, but I want to sell it to another Nicaraguan or something. In many cases,
sometimes people just don't want to bother with it. It's like I've met people who have something but like they feel lazy in the moment that you want to buy it from them. They don't really want to sell it.
Yeah.
So you have to like get lucky and time it when they actually want to sell it.
Yes. So there's a house near me here that people are constantly asking me about because it's a prime property at a good price, like $400 a month for a big colonial in a nice location. And I've been in it, but I didn't film it. But I know the property really well. And so I tell people about it, and there's a sign on it, say Aquilar, and there's the number, and we call the number, like, yeah, we'll come show it to you, you can put it on the video, and people will come, and we'll stand out there, and we'll be like, we're here, and they're like, no, we're not coming, we don't want to show it. And we're like, you could have said no earlier, like, you've wasted days, like, we're out here, standing here, I stood there for 30 minutes with a camera just waiting, and we just keep calling them, they're like, we're not coming. And they kept making excuses instead of just saying they weren't coming.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we need this thing. We need someone to commit to. Yeah.
Something I've observed here. at first, people in general in Nicaragua are very untrusting, even if you're a foreigner. So they're always going to think that you're trying to scam them if they don't understand what you're doing or it seems weird. And if it seems beneficial to them, they're going to be like, why would you do this? That will be a flag to them. So I've found that if I'm just asking like random people about videos and stuff, that's how I get treated. Absolutely. But when I don't do the video part until I've had interactions with people, like for example, you stay at a hostel a couple times and then you met the owner, then you ask, like, when I've done it in that context, like, everybody wants a video. Like, they all want videos, you know? It's just like, so it sounds like what's kind of happening is that if they actually believed you, they would let you. But because they're very cautious and they think that maybe there's some angle you have or you're going to show it to a thief or whatever. Because in Nicaragua, letting someone into your house it's different than in the U.S. letting someone into your house. Like in the U.S., letting someone in your house, they could just be like somebody, a salesperson at your door or whatever. Whereas here in Nicaragua, if you let someone in your house, if a Nicaraguan lets you into their house, they respect you. That means that like they're making a gesture to you that they would not make to most people at all.
That's true.
Letting someone into your house is an honor. It's a very culturally it's funny because as foreigners, people let us into their houses all the time. But it really is like, I mean, why do you think their houses are surrounded by walls and bars and concrete? You know, it's totally different. Like,
yeah, it's very much the citadel of life. I've noticed. So I have a new channel. I don't know. I think you saw it, Nicaragua, and we're starting to do interviews on it. It's very new, right? And we're really excited because we have a video from like 4 days ago. So this is a brand new channel that had 21 subscribers when we brought out this video. And I think we're pushing 700 views now on a 3-hour long video. And like with no subscribers, like now there's more subscribers, but like it's moving really fast. And so for the last couple of weeks, because the channel's about 3 weeks old, and about 3 weeks ago, it was, what's going on? What are you doing? We showed up a few places. Some of the people know us and they're like, whatever. But after that video, we're getting like constant calls from venues and artists. And they're like, can I be interviewed on this show? Can you come out to the museum and film an event there? Can you come to our, and we're getting constant requests from like big name places. They're like, can you? Yeah. Like
value too.
Yeah, they're like, you're just making concert videos and like interviewing bands. This is amazing, like so straightforward and simple, and nobody's doing it. And now like we went to a place here, and they're like, whoa, you're with them? Your drinks are free. They're like, film here anytime. And it's really cool. It's amazing how fast that's taking off, and it's just fun. It gets us in places like we're guaranteed a table at any venue.
I think that's sort of the true power of YouTube. People look at YouTube and they think like, okay, how can I get thousands and thousands of dollars a month from AdSense and ads? But really how YouTube actually changes people's lives is through networking. It's insane when you physically exist, it's very challenging as a human to find other like-minded people. Most of us are totally alone. We feel like, we don't know anyone else who's like-minded and that kind of thing. But the moment you start making videos about a subject, it totally changes because suddenly it's like this doorway opens and the only people who come out of that doorway, all the interactions with them are like-minded. And it's like, it just fucking shatters this illusion that you're separate and disconnected and alone. And like, as soon as you make videos and people can contact you, it's like, like YouTube is amazing. Honestly, it's incredible what it does. And that effect alone, even if you make videos and you never make any money off of them, if you just meet people from those videos, like my whole life changed on multiple times simply because I had a video. Like I am in Nicaragua because I got invited to an event because I'd made a video on YouTube. And I got the house I was renting at in Nicaragua, or in the US at the time. The guy rented it to me because he looked at my YouTube channel and saw I actually made YouTube videos and my face was the same. So in his head, I'm reliable, I'm credible, I'm trustworthy.
Right.
It was literally like a degree or something. And it's so ironic because that channel, those aren't they're dead subscribers. That's from an era of drop shipping I made ages ago where I accumulated 21,000 subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not real. Like, subscribers on YouTube don't actually matter. That's this crazy thing that I've learned recently. But it doesn't matter because YouTube is such a profound social tool that I have something that shows my face that is a big enough number that people will take me seriously. Even though it's not huge, you know, it's like a lot of people, if they put their minds to it, they could make a YouTube channel and get like 10 or 20,000 subscribers.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like crazy how much that, like, I got my job that I have now where it's not I have like a job where I make courses for this small team in California.
Oh, okay.
And it's amazing because they just give me content and I just edit it and I have total freedom to like make it better in any way that I can. And I just edit videos and it's not hourly. I just have a certain amount of work I say I'm going to do every week. And as long as I get that done, it's great. But the only reason I have this job is because when somebody is looking at a hiring process, they can just Google my name and I show up. And that's very credible. Like, being able to Google you is huge. And if you do a lot of YouTube, you will be who shows up when your name gets Googled. Unless your name is like, you know, you're a famous person, then you're, I don't know, change your name or something. That sucks.
At one point, if you Googled IT professional, it was my picture that came up first on Google.
That's cool.
I had Symantec, managers at Symantec called me one day. I was working on Wall Street. And they're like, go to Google, type in IT professional. You have to see this. And I'm like, what the? Oh, my gosh.